Hey Guild Wars 2 fans, this is Ed Park aka Taugrim, bringing you my first look at the Elementalist class. I'm running here with a non-standard spec. It's based around condition, i.e. dot damage, and it has some nice support healing capability as well. I'm running with a scepter in my main hand and dagger in my offhand, and here I'm in the fire stance or fire attunement. This provides a lot of AoE capability, and I'm getting shelled, so I dodge roll twice here to try to avoid some attacks, and then I switch into the lightning stance and use the ability Ride the Lightning. So this is a long distance charge ability to create some separation. Then I switch into the water attunement, which is our healing stance, and I get, with this spec, I get a heal over time effect. When I switch into water, I generate a point blank AoE heal automatically, and then I follow up with 2 cast time heals, which are both instant, to heal me up. All classes also get a healing ability on the number 6 key. My healing ability is called Signet of Restoration, which can be consumed to provide a burst heal, and it also provides a really awesome passive effect. Whenever I cast a weapon ability, I heal myself. So you can see periodically I get these 170s. Those are from using spells. Now I'm getting hit hard again, so I go ahead and switch into Lightning Stance, which provides some single target damage, but also some good mobility. I ride the lightning to create gap. I get behind the rock, and then I use my healing spells to get back up to full health. And a while back there I popped the elite skill. You can see that Earth Elemental, that's my pet. You have the option to choose several different elite skills, and you can see a bunch of 57s ticking really quickly on this target, this warrior who's wielding a one-hander and sword. Those are from my bleed effects, so I have 2 sources of bleed effects with this spec. I have an enchantment on my weapons. When I crit, I have a 60% chance to apply 5-second bleed, and then when I'm in the Earth stance, which is a primary offensive stance with this spec, and I use the number 1 key, that generates a bleed effect. The 1 key for the Earth stance is really nice. It's a 3-hitter, so I can heal myself 3 times for 170 apiece, as well as damaging my opponent with some direct damage and getting the stacking bleed effects. So I was 1v1ing a mage here and using some fire abilities, and then a second player joined in here, and I managed to just get the drop and finish off this opposing player. And I used my dodge roll there once, and then get out of line of sight, use both water-based heals, and then dodge roll again to get away from this player. Whenever you dodge roll, it's a guaranteed evasion from whatever attacks or crowd control effects your opponents are trying to put on you. So positioning in this game matters. It's basically everything. You can activate an ability at any time, even if your opponent is out of your line of sight, out of your facing, or out of your range. So it's important to stay, have the correct position relative to your opponents when you use attack abilities. This is not the default spec that you get when you move into the MIST, the PvP lobby at 80 to do the structured battleground PvP. This is the spec that a guildie of mine helped me out with, because I was running the default spec, which only has 12k HP. This spec has 15k HP and pretty good healing capability. So you can see here, this mage caught me when I was at half health and she was at full. I basically finished her here with 90% of my health, and a lot of this has to do with, for whatever reason, the default Elementalist spec is really not too good in PvP. It's extremely squishy. It's one of those things where, if you already know the class well, you can probably deal with the squishy factor, but for a new player, it's pretty rough. So I'm using Ride the Lightning here to get up to this node quickly, to try to provide some support. And as I move into range here, you can see everyone's health bars, and I'm using my casting spells. What's really nice for a lot of the spells in this game, you can cast them on the run. You still have a cast bar that fills up. There are some spells, depending on what they are, that will apply a root ability. So you can see I've got some bleeds sticking on this opponent. This is a ranger. He's trying to get away, and then I managed to drop him here. The condition damage, i.e. damage over time or dot effects, they don't crit, but if you get enough stacking condition effects on a player, it can really chew through their health over time. So I switch into fire stance here, and I try to use a point blank conal fire ability, but my opponent stealths. And then this warrior here who has an axe offhand, he's doing the spinning warrior attack with his axe, so I used 2 dodge rolls to get away from him. And I did use my Ride the Lightning there to try to get away from him. That's a gap closer, but I can use it as an emergency gap creator as long as I'm not targeting anyone. And I ran into a bush, so I couldn't get over it. And a lot of the charge abilities in this game don't traverse Z-axis, unlike other games. There are some teleport abilities. I'm not sure whether or not those work. But at any rate, here's another really good example of the importance of positioning and using those dodge rolls. So your ability to dodge roll is based on how much endurance you have. So if you look right above the right-hand side of my bars, you can see there's that little yellow bar that's regenerating. That's your endurance. So you can dodge roll, and it consumes endurance, and it regenerates. And you can see here, I'm taking a shellacking. I was way ahead of this Guardian. I'm in his melee range. I'm not kiting him anymore. I'm not rolling enough, so he's really, punching my face in, so I've got to really aggressively get away. You got to be really careful about positioning in this game, especially if you're playing a class that has good range mechanics. This is a Guardian. He's a total meat shield. And he's also putting out some pretty good damage, so I was really fortunate he didn't catch me there. But again, I got careless. And in this game, if you're not careful with your positioning, because he was at half health and I was at full health, a smart player can turn the tables really quickly. You can see I'm ticking there for 80s and 90s. The 80s are from a passive heal over time effect that I get at 5 points in the water tree, and then the 90 is a heal over time effect that I get from my number 6, the Signet of Restoration. That's the healing ability that I chose. I also chose a talent, a trait, so that when I use my Signet, the number 6 key for my burst heal, it doesn't consume the passive buff. Right here you see I proc my forced crit ability, so I get some nice crits there for around 800. They're pretty much, compact. So when you're in the earth stance with the scepter, your number 2 key, you can use it to get 5 rocks which act as armor around you, or you can choose to consume those rocks. Now different specs have different capabilities as far as mechanics. So I run a containment spec, but so does my guildie here, Top. He's playing an engineer, and you can see he's ticking, getting a bunch of condition effects on me, and they're all ticking for 107. You can see I'm getting like 4 or 5 ticks a second. This is just brutal, and that's aside from the direct damage that he's applying to me. So you have to look at the mechanics for your class, and with the trait system is incredibly flexible as far as building out your character. As it turns out, Top found a really unusual spec running, for bleed over times. And right here you can see I'm using abilities, but I'm getting an out of range error, and then a second here I'll get an obstruction message because my opponent's out of my line of sight. So I'm using abilities, but they're not doing anything because I can't land them on my opponent. Now I'll go ahead and dodge roll here to get away, and since in this case there's so many friendlies up here and I know people are taking a lot of damage, I come up and drop a point blank AoE heal here, and I get snared, so I'm going ahead and kite back out of it. There are other games that have action combat on the market. I actually think this game has hit the sweet spot of making it very dynamic and fast-paced while still making positioning and movement a critical part of the equation. In a lot of other games, as long as you have line of sight on your opponent, you can hit them as long as they're in your range and line of sight. In this game, you have to account for movement for when your opponents are dodge rolling. You have to account for obstructions because the game clients in other games may prevent you from casting a spell when they're out of your line of sight or range, but in this game, it's not the case at all. You've got to manage it yourself. So this is another one of my guildies. He was newer to Elementalist, so I was having fun chasing him down. And here's one really interesting thing we found out. So I've got him stacked with a ton of bleeds. You can see those 57s. He transitions into Vapor Form here, which prevents any incoming damage from hitting him, but the existing damage over time bleed effects finish him off. For more Guild Wars 2 information, please follow me at Taugrim and on my blog, taugrim.com. Take care.